This episode of Behind the Regs is sponsored by Plan Checker. Plan Checker is a UK-based digital platform designed to connect clients with verified building control and construction professionals, making it easier to find the right expertise at the right time for the right job. It doesn't replace building control bodies, and it doesn't carry out restricted activities or functions. It simply creates clearer, more transparent access to the professionals working across the industry. If you're a professional, a client, or part of the wider built environment sector, you can learn more or sign up at planchecker.co.uk.
Welcome to Behind the Regs podcast. Today I am joined by Darren Ettles and my co-host Nader. Darren has spent 35 years in building control across local authority and private sector. He is the current secretary of ABCA and a managing director of an ABCA. Darren, if you would kindly give us a bit of an introduction of yourself and just your background. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for inviting us. It's really great to be part of this. I've listened to some of your other podcasts of other people, and they're really interesting. And I think it's fascinating to get the opinions of others who are luminaries in the industry, shining lights. One of the things I did quite a few years ago, I can't remember, about 6 or 7 years ago, is actually started a forum, and I funded it myself. I got it off the ground. I phoned around a lot of small RBIs and I said, do you want to be on a forum where we can talk about stuff? And the take up has been amazing. And that's now part of the ABCA website. We are better when we have a conversation. We are better when we talk to each other. We are better when we are not insulated. So I think having this sort of thing, so congratulations to you two, having this sort of thing is fantastic. One of the problems is that we will undoubtedly be 70% wrong in everything that we say, because next year it'll all be different and we'll all have figured out what it meant. So it's really difficult doing this sort of thing because you're cast in stone. But I started in this industry. The job I had before being in building control was a glass collector at Hull University Bar. So I've been doing this all my working life. I've been doing this since I was 18. A lot of changes. Started off in a few local authorities, moved out to be an approved inspector, worked for a few companies, and then set my own company up. I am definitely somebody who I really like to know the legislation. I like to know the rules and regulations and the process and the procedures. I put it down to being slightly dyslexic. So patterns and processes I remember and they make sense to me. So I always try and work out why something is occurring, why there is a piece of legislation that says something, what the benefit of that is, why there is a regulation that says this. And it has helped me remember a load of stuff. And I think it has served, my dyslexia has served me well. So I set the company up 17 years ago. It's a great little company. We have some great procedures, great processes, a really great database that I wrote myself, and then got a company to take that on. There's a couple of other approvers use it now, and it's very, very bottom-up designed. It's very much something which is like, what do admin need? What do surveyors need? What do we need to do our job? Oh, let's put some management stuff in as well, as an afterthought. So it works very well. And as a company, we've got a really, really good team. And I think I've often thought that building control is, 70% process, 70% admin. It needs absolutely solid admin staff to pull something forward and make sure it's right. Surveyors are rubbish at admin. Never have I high expectations of surveyors when it comes to filling out forms and ticking boxes. Make it simple. Their skills lie elsewhere. So you've got to have really good admin. So as a company, I think we're really, really good. And I have found a happy place in the industry, and I'm very, very proud of where I am and where I've ended up. I do speak for the industry on occasions. We're often having conversations in the ABCA exec or the OGMs, or When we were all going through competencies, there was people like myself and Andy Crooks and Chris Vaughan and a few others sat there giving advice to people going through. And you have no idea how flattering and proud that makes you feel. It's great to be able to give something back after this lifetime of toil into our giving to our industry. It's really, really good. And to early this year speak to the House of Lords to committee about building control and what we are and what we could be, and to be quoted, to have my name in the parliamentary records forever and a day is a wonderful thing, and to actually have an opinion that some people listen to is great. There have to be more people in the industry that are willing to do this, and we have to teach people to have opinions and understand and to be able to express them knowledgeably and in an informed way. And we will only ever do that by sitting down and talking to each other and realizing what we're saying is wrong. No, I thought this, I thought we were doing this, but actually you're right, we're doing something else, and we should be doing something else. And this podcasts and all the communication, all the times we sit and have an argument on LinkedIn or whatever, I feel does the industry credit, and it makes us more mature and more willing to listen to each other and have a bit of a feedback loop. And you go, you know what? I was wrong. I didn't realize regulation 14A existed, and a rejection of a local authority application was a rejection of an application. I just thought it was just the plans, but I'm a better person because I now know that. You said elaborate, didn't you?
Thank you. That's great.
You will regret that, but carry on.
No, absolutely. It's good to hear from industry leaders like yourself, and we are always privileged and honoured to have people like yourself on the podcast. We've mentioned ABCA a couple of times. For those who may not fully understand, would we be able to give a bit of an explanation of what ABCA is, what it exists for, and who it represents?
Yes, certainly. When we first became approved inspectors many moons ago, there was an organisation called the ABCA which was set up, and it sort of represented the body in several different ways. And obviously, with the change in name, it became ABCA. I was voted in as the secretary to the ABCA not long before it changed its name. Very proud to have been the only name in the hat and to have not been voted in, because nobody needed to vote because I was just there. So I became this secretary person. And it is incredibly fascinating to share a table with other people who are equally as dedicated. And you get to sit down with people from the BSR, people from MHCLG, other people talking about what you think our industry is and where it is. And there's an incredible level of responsibility of just knowing, of having a broad opinion and not being too focused on one hobby horse that you think is wrong, but actually having an understanding of a little bit more. So we do represent RBCAs. We don't represent local authorities, and we don't represent sort of non-members, although we do try and speak for an industry, and we do try and speak for the private sector for obvious reasons. But we do represent members. Not everybody's a member. Not everybody wants to be a member. Some people don't agree with because what we say. Sometimes it's a bit controversial. But the industry's better that we're here than not. So we've sat down with the BSR through the whole BSR process. We've recommended, we've criticised, we've agreed, we've made comments. We've tried to do our best to provide an opinion of the private sector, and in lots of ways, I think we've succeeded, and in some ways, maybe we should have said something differently or louder, but we are where we are. So ABCA is a core at the moment. It used to be 3, it's gone to 5 people that are on the exec. We are a core. And then we have a monthly meeting, which is lots of other people that want to join in. So we have a committee, and there might be sort of 10 or 15 people sort of from various different approvers who are members. And then we have OGMs, and we try and provide information where we can to industry. At the moment, we are wrapped up very much in the consultation regarding local authority fees. We are writing responses. We've had meetings with MHCLG and the BSR about it, and we are trying to provide a point of view where the consultation can result in something that is workable and proportionate and is not going to be a burden on our industry. And we're going through that process at the moment. Certain stuff is being circulated to members, and we're taking opinions of members and that sort of thing. But a lot of it is inward facing towards MHCLG and the BSR. We're not a regulator. We don't tell members what they should and shouldn't be doing. If you've got a complaint about an approver, we don't deal with them. We don't tell anyone what to do. What we are is an organisation that takes opinions and views and pushes that to government. We don't take government's views or members of the public views and tell people what to do. We don't think our industry is needed that. I think we're all professional enough to do the right thing.
Yeah. Why do you think it's important that the private sector has a collective voice alongside the likes of local authority building control?
It's a really interesting question. And I think predominantly we've all got day jobs. We've all got things to do. We've all got companies to run, and those people that are running companies that see the slightly bigger picture, they've got people to manage. They've got process still. They've got to do with OSR reports. They've got to do with system. They've got so much to do. And I think one of the problems with our industry, and it's something which is only really coming to focus for me this year, is that if I've got a family law issue, I can go to a solicitor and talk about family law, and he can take a textbook off a shelf that says family law. Property law is the same. All sections of law have a textbook that you can go and get a qualification on. Building control doesn't. We don't have a textbook. We don't have anything written down that says this is how building control is. This is how it. I mean, the closest thing we've got is a manual, and that's out of date. Never really been updated. So we don't have anything. So there are some people, and I mean, there might be like 4 or 5 people in the industry who really have a good understanding of the law. Well, no, that's not true. There might be 10 or 20 people that have really good understanding of the law, really good opinions about where we're going and how the industry should work within the rules and regulations. But there's only a few that actually have the time to actually put to ABCA and to sit down in front of government and say, this is what members think. That there has to be a focus point, because there is a massive gulf between what we do on a day-to-day basis, what an RBI does on a day-to-day basis, private, public sector, doesn't matter, what we do on a day-to-day basis and what's written in legislation. It doesn't say in legislation that we should do inspections. Nothing says we should do inspections. Nothing really says we should do a plan appraisal for approved. We all do it because it's part of the job. It's part of the due diligence. But there is nothing written down in law that tells an RBI what to do from 9 to 5. So somebody has to collect this working practice and go to MHCLG and say, no, this won't work. You can't impose this, because that'll stop us from just doing our day-to-day job. There'll be so much bureaucracy involved with that thing. We have to do it this way. Part R was a massive failure for our industry. There is no, in my mind, my personal opinion, there is absolutely no benefit or need for anybody who's building a house to get a sign off for gigabit ready internet before an initial notice is submitted. Absolutely pointless and irrelevant. There's no need for that. And there's no need for it to go on an initial notice, and there's no need for it to be a rejection. If you want early engagement, stick it on a planning application. That's fine. I've got no issue with that. Or just stick it on as building regulations, and you'll get something at the end of the job, just like your Part P. But why it's an initial notice? No idea. Absolutely, for me, nonsensical. And that should have been pushed back to the MHCLG a lot harder, and we should have had a win on that one, but we didn't. But there are other stuff we have won on, like the levy, for instance.
Yeah, I've had issues with Part R quite recently, and it can be incredibly frustrating for likes of ourselves and for clients looking to get the works underway, and then they can't quite understand them how they're supposed to be getting these bits of information over to us where they need to go, and they struggle. And even you can try and give as much information on how they can try and find that, they still find it difficult. They just want to do what they do, not be trying to find all these bits of information to send over.
It's not how you build a house. The first thing you don't do once you've got your planning permission is work out your gigabit ready broadband. It's just not what you do. You do it at the end, or you do it when it's necessary. But if it's something that's really important, stick it on planning. I mean, I think one of the problems with our industry is we get very focused on little things, and Part R is an example. But if you transposed that rule about Part R to Part L, and you said, okay, before you submit an initial notice, you have to have a SAP calc passed. And you go, well, okay, then, it's really important that you've got that design in, but why are we doing it before the initial notice? Why is this all of a sudden so massively important? You could say you have to have a fire strategy sign off. There's lots of stuff you could say. And if you take that Part R principle and put it around the rest of the regulations, I just don't think it makes sense.
Going back to ABCA, is there any recurring concerns that are coming from members at the moment?
Not so much. You have to understand that the incredible upheaval that we went through in recent years was all about competencies. As somebody that runs an AI stroke approver, the process of becoming an approver was a bit frustrating. It was a bit clunky, but it was easy. We just put the stuff together, we sent it off, the BSR asked a few questions, and we said okay. We went, oh, fine, we're okay. Getting surveyors through the competency process, motivating, supporting, and getting that done was very, very difficult, and everybody had an awful lot of stress about it. But we sort of got there, and as a company, the company that I deal with, sort of 95% of what we do is material alterations. Only 5% is sort of new build. It's all loft conversions, extensions, and mezz floors, office fit outs, into all that sort of stuff. And we're sort of like a 60-40 split domestic to commercial. And you know what? The BSR hasn't really affected us. The only changes is we've had to update our application forms, but we've got over that. People are putting down principal contractor details on it. We've got over that. We've convinced everybody that declarations are needed. We've got over that. It's for the vast majority of stuff that we've had to deal with as an RBCA, we've got it sorted. We're okay. From an RBI's point of view, we're sort of still doing the day job. It hasn't really had a major effect. The the pulling back on advice and telling people the answers is something that a lot of the industry has struggled with. And there's a lot of varying degrees of adherence to that. I must admit, in the last 35 years of building control, I've never told anybody how to design anything. I've told people what the building regulations say, and I've given them advice on options for achieving that. But I've never designed anything, because design, I just don't know anything about it. I'm just building control. That's what I am. So there has been some changes, all for the good, I'd say. I don't think there's any negatives there at all, really. And I think some of the positive things that have come about is a greater appreciation and adoption of remote inspections. People having a better understanding of sort of liability, and the fact is, it's the principal designer's job to design it right. It's the principal contractor's job to build it right, and it's our job to make a few records. So it is a change in emphasis for the surveyor to take a step back from a lot of stuff that they used to. They used to stuff that we did wrong, but we are now doing right. And just putting the liability and the responsibility for design and construction fairly exactly where it belongs. We visit site 4 or 5 times, 2 or 3 times. We're not there in the bits in the middle. We don't know what's going on. We can't guarantee anything. And, the person on site with the tin that says how to apply it on the back of it and where the limitations of that application is, that's the person that is responsible for how that product is applied, not us. And I think we've tried to take on too much responsibility in the past, and the changes have allowed us to step back from that. And I think that's absolutely right. The responsibility should be on the designers and the contractors that should know what they're doing.
Couldn't agree more, Darren. To be fair, some touched on some interesting points earlier. Specifically the one about design advice. Like,
Yes.
I remember when, because I come from an architectural background.
Yeah.
That's why I studied that's my education was architectural engineering, and I used to obviously do a lot of design work before I jumped into the other side of the fence and becoming a building control surveyor at the time. That was about 7 years ago. And it took me quite a while to take off the architectural design hat off and then put the regulation hat on. But I was told from day one, even 7 years ago, without any of these changes at that point, is that we're not allowed to give design advice.
I think it's an
and that was
interesting.
before any changes.
I think there's an interesting point about conflict of interest, where we have to be independent and have no financial or personal involvement with the project. And the conflict of interest isn't us as surveyors letting things go or allowing something to be built that actually isn't compliant. It's not about that. The conflict of interest is us stepping in too much and giving design advice and helping
Yes.
people out too much. And if you are personally involved with somebody, you might do that. And the point is that if something goes wrong in the future, there has to be somebody's name on that design, and it's not yours. It's somebody else's. And all of the changes that have occurred, and one of the things I've sort of said, and it's not glib, I'm genuinely saying this, is that if there is another major disaster like Grenfell, the inquiry will not take 7 years, because everything will be documented. Every piece of paper will be in place. Principal designers and principal contractors will have put their name to it, and the information will be there to really get to the bottom of it. And when you are responsible for something, you do a different due diligence. You do take more care, and I think people are doing that, and they are accepting that. And one of the conversations that we're having at the moment is in relation to the fire authority consultation, and as a building control body, we are responsible for sending plans that are compliant to the fire authority, and they often sort of give advice. And it's sort of, well, if advice is taken, who becomes the designer? If the fire authority go to a property and go, you have a problem, this property isn't compliant, and they put an improvement order on it to install the fire alarm, do they become the designer telling somebody that they have to have a fire alarm? And then if there is a problem down the line and something else occurs, who becomes liable for the installation of that fire alarm? Everything has to come back to the duty holders. And we as building control are not a duty holder in that respect. Neither's the fire authority, neither's the fire risk assessor, neither of the other professionals on site. It should go back to the people who hold the purse strings, who can make the decisions about what is the right thing to do and what they should be improving and installing and correcting, and what they want. And it should not be a decision left to another body like ourselves.
Darren, I'm going to go back a little bit further at the beginning of the start of the podcast. Obviously, you've mentioned that you run an RBCA yourself today. Now, I want to touch on a few things about running a registered building control approver in today's system. Previously, I think you've answered some of the questions that I was about to ask about how has post the Building Safety Act environment changed the day-to-day reality of operating a private building control body. But you've already answered that and said that it didn't change much.
I'll add something to that. Is
okay.
There have been some significant changes to what I've had to do to be an RBCA, but they're not particularly significant. It's just some more hoops to jump through and hurdles to jump over. In the industry, I think that one of the fundamental changes has been that the local authority now have a regulator, and local authority building control bodies actually do have somebody who is their regulator, who is carrying out audits and looking at processes and procedures and making sure that it's done properly. And if it's not done properly, they have the ability to hold somebody to account. And that somebody could be the chief executive who's not funding that building control body properly. It could be the authority itself for not supporting the building control manager. And I think that is an incredibly important and underestimated benefit of the whole system coming in. It's absolutely fantastic. I've been around for a while, and we've done an awful lot of reversions where we can't resolve projects. And since the BSR came in, Building Safety Act and the Building Safety Regulator, I have had more local authorities getting in touch and going, "Oh, what's happening to this one? Why have you cancelled it? What's the problem with it? Great, can we have some records? Fine, fantastic." And it is no criticism of the local authority that it didn't happen so much 5 years ago. It just wasn't on the agenda. It just wasn't focused. It just wasn't something that was important. The responsibility was on the homeowner to contact the local authority and get it sorted out. That isn't the case anymore. It's sort of the other way around. The local authority are just more engaged, and I think that's a fantastic thing. And the power that we need in our industry is, some teeth. And at the moment, the local authority are the ones with the teeth, and that's a massive change, really important. Shouldn't never be underestimated, the importance of that.
As an RBCA director, what pressures aren't always visible in guidance or policy documents that you face as an RBCA director?
It's quite difficult to answer that because I am very much ingrained in what the legislation, the law, the process, and the procedures, and I can sort of see between the gaps. I can see things that are that we need to do. I think that as an RBCA, there are some that have underestimated the importance of admin and document keeping and records. And I think there's a lot of, we really need to be doing this. Right, fine, we'll get it sorted out. And there are some people that have just been a little bit caught out by that. And as ABCA, we've given quite a bit of support to people who have needed just to brush up a little bit. And that's fine. That's just industry. Sometimes you're too focused on just doing the day job to realise. I think some of the things that some of the pressures are not to do the job the way we used to do it. There was a conversation that's in the industry at the moment about consumer protection, being there to represent somebody, and we're not. We represent the legislation, and I think that's really important, because if we're consumer protection in relation to the homeowner, it could be the homeowner that's at fault. They could be the one doing it wrong. So we can't be on their side. We just have to be on the side of the legislation. And I think once you understand that, an awful lot comes into clarity. Some of the pressures are just not doing the job we used to do, and writing an inspection report. Surveyors' inspection reports are required to be certain things. They are a list of what you've seen, observations, non-compliances and contraventions. It's not that you discussed the insulation types with the builder, took a load of photos of something and talked about a HVAC system. These aren't inspection records. The BSR have very specifically said what an inspection record is, and we have to recognise that more than we do. One of the little pressures that I think we haven't fully realised yet is the OSR data that we're actually submitting and the key performance indicators. Some of the questions haven't been particularly well put together, and the answers are always going to be 0 or 100%. And I think there is a drive towards getting the OSRs to be more reflective. And when they are, I think the BSR will start to ask us to influence behavioural nudge. We will have a big behavioural nudge from the BSR, and they'll go, we've just found out all the data is this. So as an industry, this is where you need to go with it. And I think that's something which will be coming. But actually sort of hidden pressures. I think a lot of the pressures are just out there in the open that we're dealing with. And if you've been a bit proactive about it, I think it's okay. I think the pressures aren't that bad.
This episode is sponsored by Plan Checker. Across building control and the wider construction sector, one issue keeps coming up: capacity. The work is there, the responsibility is huge, and the pressure keeps increasing. Plan Checker was built to help bridge that gap by making it easier to access independent, appropriately qualified professionals when support is genuinely needed. Whether that's for plan reviews, consultancy input, or specialist advice. It doesn't change statutory responsibility, and it doesn't interfere with regulatory rules. It simply helps people find expertise without relying on informal networks or last-minute phone calls. If you want to see how that works in practice, visit planchecker.co.uk. Great. Do you think the current commercial model for private sector building control is sustainable?
There's a really interesting conversation at the moment about resources, and it all flows back to the commercial sustainable model that you say. So there's some very, very simple economics about it all, and the economics are whether you're private or public sector, you have to bring in as much money in and slightly more than you're actually giving out as a company. So as a surveyor, if you're paying somebody a salary of £50,000, the fees that they bring in a year should sort of be twice that, and that's very basic economics. 2.5 times, great. If you happen to be a solicitor, it's more like 4 times, but we're just a very lowly industry. So the number of building control projects in the country as being recorded by the BSR. We haven't had a full year's data yet, so we don't know how many building notice, full plans, initial notices, regularisations there have ever been in the country before. We've never had a figure. In January, well, maybe February, we will have that figure for the first time ever. We also know how many RBIs there are, and that we have to start working out what the resources is. If you have a workforce and the workforce has a salary, that salary and the on cost of running that company, the twice the salary sort of thing, you have to make that from fees, from building control fees. The fees that come in has to cover that. So if you have 20%, 50%, 100% more surveyors in the country, if you increase the number of surveyors doing RBI work by a percentage, fees have to go up by that percentage as well. Because if you don't, the economic model falls apart. If you have 50% more surveyors, you have to put your fees up by 50% to cover the salaries of those surveyors, or it doesn't work. I think a loft conversion, if you go and visit it 3 times and the fee is less than £1,000, but not by a lot, I think that's fair. If you're turning around to a homeowner who happens to be in, pick a city, Doncaster or Oxford, and say your fees for a loft conversion are now 1,400, you sort of getting to the point where it's sort of what are we doing for this? And we might just be funding people for no reason. We might not need them. So there's a really, really big conversation required about resources. And, from ABCA's point of view, talking to people who just do building control, don't do anything else, who are just building control companies, maybe if resources, we had 10%, maybe 15% more surveyors, that would be good. But it's not a big figure. I think a lot of companies that do other stuff, sort of warranties or other services, and like the local authority does a lot of other stuff that's non-fee earning. I think that they have resource issues, or they're talking about resource issues, and it's because of the other stuff. If you get rid of the other stuff, there's probably enough surveyors in the country. We don't really need that many more. Some recent figures is that from this time last year, the number of class 2, 3 surveyors is 13% more than it was 12 months ago. So that's a massive win for the industry. Approvers, we have more surveyors working as RBIs for approvers than we did back in the ACAI days. Back in the CIC days when we were approved inspectors. We submitted documents to CIC every year, and we know what that figure was in the last year of being an approved inspector. There's quite a few more surveyors. So as a business model, it's successful, but we have to resist some of these calls for large numbers of resources to be added, because I think we should just pull back, just concentrate on building control, just the building regulations, the applications, the restricted activities and functions, and the advice, and just stick with that. I don't think we need to do anything else, or we shouldn't do anything else.
Yeah. So it's good to hear that there's been an increase in some of the 2Fs, class 2s, should I say.
Yeah.
You've been involved with some of the competence schemes and interview panels. From your perspective, what do you feel is working well and what isn't?
As an RBI, you're both RBIs. I'm an RBI. You are giving the approvers that you work for advice about the initial notice and advice about final certificates and advice about cancellations and amendments and things like that. A question back to you two. When's the last time you read a final certificate?
Yesterday.
Do you know what's on it?
Yeah. Every single section of it. Even the most important one that says it's evidence but not conclusive evidence that I have to explain to
That's a fair point. So there is a paragraph, and I can't quote it exactly, but when you give advice on the final certificate, what you are saying is, has the ABCA taken reasonable steps within its competence to understand, to appreciate that the building regulations have been met? Not Schedule 2, not Schedule 1, A, B, C, and D, but the building regulations, all the building regulations. Schedule 1 is just a very small part of the document. It's 20 pages of 400. That's the building regulations, but Schedule 1 is just 20 pages. But what you're saying is not, has the building on site been constructed to meet Schedule 1? What you're saying when you give advice on the final certificate is, has the ABCA taken reasonable steps? So how do you assess that? So for competence schemes, for me, I think all the competence schemes need to concentrate on the advice that the RBI gives the approver or the local authority. I think there needs to be a real fundamental understanding of what that advice actually is, what you are actually saying, and it's not necessarily about the building on site. There are a lot of other things that you need to comment on. I think as an industry, RBIs need to move away from construction technology and materials. It's very easy to look at a product and say, yes, an RBI should know that expanding fire foam is okay up to 30 millimeters. And this was a conversation on LinkedIn not so long ago that John Cumberledge actually we were having a conversation and John Cumberledge actually put it on LinkedIn. And if an RBI should know that expanding foam is only capable of filling a gap up to 30 millimeters, then, a different type of foam might be 20 millimeters or 35 millimeters. If we have to know that level of knowledge, then take that specific and spread it throughout Part B, and then go to the other documents, Part L, Part F, Part J. What would we have to know as RBIs if we had to know that one product was acceptable for 30 millimeters? You'd have to know every screw and flange and
Everything.
grommet and hanger. We should be a lot higher level. There are diagrams in the approved documents. The design should meet those diagrams. And paragraphs. If they don't meet the guidance, you should turn around to the designer and go, you've not met the guidance. How can you demonstrate that you've complied with the functional requirements? And something will happen. Somebody will say something and there'll be a design put forward. And then you go, great, that's fantastic. Our job is then to go onto site and go, yeah, you've built it as the design. And if it deviates, you say, you're not doing it as design. Can somebody redesign this, please, and give me a design? But it's not the materials. It's not the construction technology. It's not how it's put together. It's not what it says on the back of the tin. We can't know everything. We are not omnipotent nor omnipresent. We cannot do that. And we have to stop trying. I was talking to one of our surveyors yesterday, and he said, honestly, it is better if you know nothing about materials, because then you will just stand there and say, is that acceptable? Have you put that door in right with all those materials, those 9 different products that you've used to put that door in? Have you done it right? And they'll go, yes. And you go, fine, I'll walk away. It's not taking a hinge off and seeing how long the screws are and whether there's an interesting pad behind it. It's the guy that did it. Oh,
So looking back on the competency assessments, do you think they properly reflect capability, judgment, and experience?
no. I think that every surveyor should learn to refer back to the approved documents as often as they possibly can. If you've got it on your phone or a tablet and everything like that, that's how you check compliance. What you do is you look at a drawing, you look at a design, and you have the approved documents open in front of you on the screen, and you make sure, as much as possible, all the drawings meet the diagrams, and that's what you do as a job. And then you take those drawings onto site, and where it's not built as the drawings, they need to be redesigned. That's the job. The processes and procedures and what happens if it goes wrong is underplayed as far as I'm concerned. When should a contravention notice be issued? When should advice be given? What is an observation and when should it be recorded? And how that is done is far, far more important. I think there's too much emphasis on just remembering numbers. As somebody that is slightly dyslexic, I'm not very good at remembering numbers. But you've introduced me as an industry leader, but I can't remember what the height of I think there was a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago at the ABCA meeting about the height of an internal means of escape sill. Can't remember. It's not something that sticks in my head very well because I'm slightly dyslexic. So I just go back to the document and look it up. And I encourage every RBI just to go back to the document every single time. Just don't remember off the top of your head because you might be wrong. You might have misremembered it. But if you just go back to the document and read the entire paragraph, there might be something in that paragraph that you've forgotten about. It might not just be the height of the sill. There might be something else. Just keep going back. You'll be better for it. And if the competency assessments move slightly away from that and they start talking about processes, procedures, why advice is given, the name of an RBI goes on an initial notice. If that project is an independent part of a HRB, it's a retail fit out on ground floor. Is it okay if that RBI is a 2D or should they be a 3H surveyor because it's a HRB? That's a question that should be asked. And the reason why it should be asked is because there isn't a written down answer. If you're asking a question the answer is written down in the approved documents, the surveyor just goes and looks at it and gives you the answer. What is the height of a sill for means of escape window? Just go and look and give them the answer. But should an independent part be a 2D or a 3H? That's a question that doesn't have an answer written down. That's what competency should be about. The stuff that isn't written down.
That's very interesting.
Silence.
No, it's obviously
it's very hard to interview somebody. It's very hard to interview somebody and check competence against stuff that isn't written down. It's very easy to pull part B up, take 20 questions out of it and just check to see if somebody knows all these answers. It's much more difficult to interview somebody and assess competence about something that isn't actually written down because it requires you to know it.
But is it an interview or is it a professional discussion?
It's a bit of both.
Okay.
And
I'll look at that. I'll leave that one.
It's a long time since I was ever interviewed, and on the occasions when I have been interviewed, we've had a professional discussion because I ask more questions than the other person. But that's just who I am. I've asked you 2 questions today.
Good questions. We're always open to questions. It's a back and forth conversation that we're having.
And it always should be. And it always should be. I mean, I've done an awful lot of stuff, and I've sat in many, many meetings, but I learned stuff from people that have been in the industry 6 months all the time. Somebody asked me a question that I've not thought of for 20 years. And I go, oh, Christ, that's a really good question. And the world's changed about me, and I've got to reassess it. And I can only do that if I talk to people that don't already think they know the answer. And that's the joy of building control. There's lots of people that just need education and mentoring, and they'll ask you questions that you've got to reassess because the landscape's changed. It changed around us, seismic.
Talking about landscape changing, collaboration across the sector.
That would be
Obviously,
good.
you've worked closely with local authorities, regulators, and national bodies. Do you think collaboration is improving or becoming more fragmented?
I think it is. I think it's polarizing a little bit. I've spoken to many. 5 years ago, we all knew the rules and they hadn't changed. So we just did what we thought was right. And sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it wasn't correct. But that's just what we did. And nobody really queried it because we all just knew what the answers were, local authority and approved inspectors. But because the legislation have changed, we've all had to sort of reassess it and we've all had to relook at it. And I've had more conversations with local authorities in the last couple of years than I have in the previous 15. Just because I've had to reread something and then speak to a local authority and go, well, actually, I think it says this and they think it says that. And then we come to an agreement. And there were loads and loads of local authorities who are just very, very open to conversation, very open to speaking about interpretations, and quite often just do see the bigger picture of what's the best thing to get it right, not necessarily what does the letter of the law say beyond common sense, but how can we make this right without breaking the rules, without breaking the law, but how can we make this right? And most local authorities are very much like that. I think there has been a bit of polarization and some a little bit becoming a little bit more threatened, maybe. I don't know. I don't want to start surmising why people are doing things, but I think some are less cooperative. But I honestly think we are better off if we all just communicate and we treat each other as peers, and we don't think that one party is better than another because it is the local authority or it's bigger or whatever. We just need to start cooperating and talking to each other as equals, and the world will be a much, much better place in building control because of that. So I think there's been a little bit of polarization, but I also know that it is breaking down, and I have a lot of faith that in a few years' time we'll just be helping each other out, very much like the NHS and private healthcare does. If the NHS has backlogs or can't fit in an appointment for months, they get in touch with private healthcare and they get it sorted out. And it's the same doctors, it's the same, sometimes it's even the same theatre, but it's done differently just because private healthcare has different skills, different abilities, and that works. And I would like local authorities to work with approvers and RBIs as using that as a model. We all just want the same thing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Do you think ABCA play quite a big role in bridging the gap between the public and the private sector?
Not so much. We are a members organisation and members pay fees and we are there to represent members. We do speak to the BSR and MHCLG, and we have for the last 2 years asked for joint meetings with LABC, sat around the table, and it hasn't happened yet. So we have been asking, and we have had a vote saying, shall we encourage LABC managers to join ABCA? And everybody, unanimously said, yeah, let's get everybody around the same table. It just hasn't happened so much. And there might be other political reasons for that. I don't know. But I am confident that it won't be the same this time next year. I'm absolutely sure of it. But I am an optimist.
You were recently involved in a parliamentary discussion, and they had a member of LABC there who obviously gave her views, you give your views. Do you think there is an understanding of what we actually do in the industry before decisions are made, or is it now with these discussions where they're now starting to understand a bit more of what our roles are?
I think that the vast majority of RBIs out there doing the job, the day to day, are perfectly competent and know exactly what the job is. There are different ways of doing the same job. Some people think you should go on site 7 times. Some people think you should go on 3 times. We all know we shouldn't be designing, but discussing stuff's okay. Some people won't say anything. It's just different ways of doing the same job. I think RBIs all know exactly what they're doing. Maybe local authorities and approvers have had some conceptual things to deal with in what we are as a company, what we should be writing down, the way we should be compiling information. Should you send out an initial notice if there isn't a principal contractor appointed? I say no. Some people say yes. Nobody's wrong. We just do it differently. Does the BSR understand us as an industry? No. Does the CIC, does the ICC, does MHCLG understand as an industry? No, I don't think they do. I genuinely don't think they do. The concept of explaining ourselves to people outside the industry is mind-boggling. And I think there's a lot of people in the industry who don't necessarily read the legislation as much as they should do, and they might be doing something other than what the legislation says. But in relation to a roof that's flat with water stood on it, it complies with the regulation, but it doesn't meet the guidance. Would
So
you
basically,
pull it up as a non-compliance? And how do you explain that to the homeowner, the contractor, and somebody from MHCLG or somebody from the BSR?
I did flag up something.
Would you pull it up as a non-conformity?
No,
I think
I did
you'd
speak
want
about
to,
this one
but
before.
restricted, aren't you?
Yeah, I did have a similar example about that, and I shared it on LinkedIn before about a part F, that it demonstrates compliance with the functional requirement, but it's not strictly with the guidance, but the functional requirement is there. So the provision of background ventilation is available. But the location of where it was like not, the guidance says it should, not must. And these wordings are quite manipulative in the approved documents, when it sometimes, says it should, sometimes say it must, and should doesn't mean it has to be there or it has to be at that level. And yeah,
Some people who are professionally legally qualified would say that must and should are the same word, but there are some real complexities about what we do. And you, Jack, said you'd like to pull something. Would you serve a contravention notice for a flat roof that didn't leak but was flat and held water? Is that a contravention? Would you?
Well, I don't think it would.
I don't think you'd be able to
have a stand to be a contravention if it's, well, it isn't a contravention if it's serving what the purpose is for it. How could you say that?
So you go out on site this afternoon and you do an inspection on a house and you issue a final certificate tomorrow morning, but it's not raining and you don't know that roof doesn't leak. So how on earth could you know? And that's the proof, but not conclusive proof. It just wasn't raining when you were on site, so you didn't know whether the roof was leaking or not.
sure.
Part B is a fascinating So reasonable provision should be made for alarm and escape so people get out of the house in relation to Part B. But you only ever know whether Part B has been met or not if there is genuinely a fire. Everything else is just theoretical.
Yep.
And it's an arbitrary standard. An escape window is this size, but it's an arbitrary standard that somebody may or may not be able to climb out of. It's arbitrary, it's theoretical, and you'll only ever know whether it complies with Part B if it actually catches fire. So how can you contravene something which, if you don't know whether it's right or wrong? And it's really conceptually difficult to understand.
True. Darren,
Yeah.
it's been an absolute pleasure, honestly, having you. We just, honestly, been greatly appreciated that you've given us the time. One final question.
I don't do the nuts and bolts very well. I don't do the nuts and bolts very well. I don't do the approved documents very well. A lot of it, we should be dealing a lot higher up in building control, and that's where we should be, very high level. Sorry, one final question.
So what message would you want building control professionals, particularly those in like leadership roles like yourself, to take away about navigating the next few years from this conversation?
There is so much that we do across the sector, which is local authority, private public sector, but also the BSR, because they are a building control body as well, that we have commonality over, that we have cooperation, that we're all doing the same thing. And some of the legislation is not helping. We should all appreciate as a simple concept, should you be allowed to occupy an FSO building on an extension of time if a final certificate hasn't been issued or there isn't a completion certificate from the local authority? That's something that the entire industry could get together, and we could lobby the BSR and MHCLG and say, look, the extension of time process is undermining the importance of the building regulations by this thing. Just stop occupation. You're not allowed to occupy a building until you get a final or a completion certificate for an FSO building. Full stop. We should all be together. We should have a memorandum that is what we need to do as an industry, and we need to campaign with it until it's accepted and it's changed in law. There are so many things that we could do instead of squabbling about initial notices and 5-day rules and an extension of times 1 month and 3 months and stuff like that. There are better things that we should be putting our professionalism to. And it does require us to work together, and it does require us to support each other. And I don't think the local authority should have a time limit on issuing an approval. I think it's a false jeopardy that creates pressure when it's entirely not needed. I would be very happy to support the local authority on getting that removed from legislation entirely, if they would have me. We just need to work together.
Absolutely. Darren, it's been a pleasure having you on. I know, obviously, a very busy guy, so we appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us on the podcast. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. I look forward to listening to it back in the car whilst cringing.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Cheers, gents. Thanks so much.
This episode of Behind the Regs is sponsored by Plan Checker. Plan Checker is a UK-based digital platform designed to connect clients with verified building control and construction professionals, making it easier to find the right expertise at the right time for the right job. It doesn't replace building control bodies, and it doesn't carry out restricted activities or functions. It simply creates clearer, more transparent access to the professionals working across the industry. If you're a professional, a client, or part of the wider built environment sector, you can learn more or sign up at planchecker.co.uk.